Right, back live with you tonight here on In Focus, and thanks for staying on. Elections in Zimbabwe has been, of course, the talk, and the president was inaugurated. Now the president has appointed a new cabinet, which was sworn in yesterday. Now this has become a talking point. He appointed his son and nephew to key ministerial posts. His son, Kudakwashe, has taken up the role of Deputy Finance Minister, and the nephew, Tongai, is the Deputy Tourism Minister. For more on this conversation, we are now joined by Richard Mahomva, who speaks for the Zimbabwean government. Richard, good to talk to you again tonight here on In Focus, and thank you very much for your time. I see some reporting around this cabinet, and one publication saying Zimbabwe is falling to dynasty politics like Gabon and the DRC. Is this what's happening? Why is the president appointing members of his family?
Well, I think it's narrow to confine the debate to the appointment of family members. But the issue at the end is we need to question if there was any law that was broken. And as far as the constitutional parameters of our country is concerned, no law has been broken. Of course, you've got a case of suspected nepotism, and one would also interpret it to some extent as a media hyped or an opposition hyped type of nepotism narrative. But we would all know that all appointments happen simply because the president has got a certain degree of discretion. And you guys in the media have generously misconstrued the meaning of these appointments, and you have been labeling these to be cabinet appointments. Deputy ministers are not cabinet ministers, and they do not have the executive jurisdiction that cabinet ministers have. So some of these issues, for me, are emanating largely from a point of ignorance, number one, and also from an opposition activist hyped sentiment, which the media is not doing any good in terms of neutralizing.
So there are many merely ceremonial posts. We are well aware of that. The two gentlemen are citizens, from what I hear, or at least the Deputy Finance Minister is also an MP. So in terms of procedures and Constitution of Zimbabwe, they have a right to be appointed, no doubt about it. And there is a question of this excuse that I'm seeing being given to say it's cabinet shadowing. Explain that to me. What does it mean?
Sorry, it's cabinet what?
Shadowing.
No. I doubt there could be any interest in that respect.
So what's the use of these ceremonial posts?
It is appointing people that were merely elected into office. You'd notice in the case of Tongai Mnangagwa, you'd know that is the only MP out of the 30 constituencies in Harare who was actually elected into office. And when the president appoints officials for these important positions, he receives CVs and looks at academic credentials and also look at professional competencies. So I'm looking forward to anyone that would debate that these individuals are not competent, that these individuals' professional credibility is not tested. But if we were to only confine the debate to the fact that they are relatives and because of that they should be elbowed out of politics, I think it is a disenfranchising effect as far as the democratic landscape of our country is concerned.
What is the experience of the president's son in government?
Well, as in the past, you'd notice that you've got even ministers like Rira, who was a university academic. So the approach that the president has been deploying, even the current minister of agriculture, he was a technocrat. So there's been this approach of fusing technocrats with politicians in a bid to fuse the notion of the proactive political dimension to statecraft and also the technocratic dimension to statecraft. And also you'd recall that there's the aspect of the youth demographic dividend, which falls right within the justification of his appointment. So outside his blood ties to the president. I see a youthful figure that has been appointed to take up a leading national role. And for me, it shows a responsive approach to ensuring that the youth demographic dividend is represented fully in the structures of statecraft in Zimbabwe.
So he doesn't have experience in government. That's what you're telling me. You're telling me he's youth. He meets the youthful demographic. He is a technocrat. He's an academic. He went to school. I believe he just recently graduated in law. Before that, he was an actuary. But he has no experience in government.
You would recall that even when the president first came into public office immediately after independence, alongside his contemporaries, they didn't have government experience, and that was the case even with ANC cadres after your armed struggle. That was the case with cadres in Chama Pinduzi of Tanzania. So the issue of essentialism around government experience for me is neither here nor there. Like I said, it speaks to the full representation of the youth demographic dividend. And for me, I think that is very important. And remember, this election is based on the outcome of a democratic electoral outcome, which should see issues of regional and gender balancing taking course. So I look at it within that limit. I'm not looking at officials on the basis of the blood that runs in their veins. No, I'm not looking
so
at it.
Are you saying to us there could not have been a person within ZANU-PF, for example, the rank and file of ZANU-PF, who has experience in running government and in a key critical sector like finance, where you would be dealing with investors, you would be dealing with issues of economic stability, somebody who's well experienced in that space. There is none in the rank and file of ZANU-PF who could have occupied that position.
Already you've got Minister Mtuli, but again to say that there are ministries that are more essential than others, I think is quite narrow and quite subjective. Because each ministry is supposed to feed into the demographic demands of our people. It could be in the area of education, it could be in health. So for us to try and create weights into what one ministry means compared to the other, I think is very narrow and vilifies the agenda of leaving no one and no place behind, including public needs as well as public service delivery needs of our people.
But would you say that a ministry like the Ministry of Finance is key to inspiring confidence in a task, for example, of restoring the economy of Zimbabwe?
In as much as the Ministry of Industries is equally credible to that effect, in as much as the Ministry of Women and SMEs is particularly doing that, in as much as the Ministry of Tourism is particularly doing that, and also add to that the Ministry of the Youth, which is a new newly split ministry that is also supposed to usher issues of economic empowerment, but not also forgetting the equal economic importance of the Ministry of War Veterans, which is actually being led by a former diplomat who brought a lot of investment into our country and is actually helping put intellectual property into the investment opportunities that have been created by the important demographic dividend of the war veterans in our country.
Yeah. What's the representation of women in this cabinet?
Well, I could mention names and maybe not necessarily the percentage. Sorry, you caught me off guard. But I know that there's the Minister Barbara Rozi, there's Minister Mawetera, there's Minister Monica Mtswangwa, a women rights activist of note. And I also know that there is deputy ministers who also happen to be female, and we anticipate to also see the same perhaps with the permanent secretaries that are going to be appointed. But most importantly, you would notice that even the UN Secretary General was quite emphatic on this aspect of the inclusion of women, and also you notice that in Zimbabwe we've got our women's quota. So that aspect of gender, I strongly feel, has been constitutionally he has been constitutionally pronounced in terms of our parliamentary structure as well as in terms of the cabinet proportional representation.
So according to the Women Coalition of Zimbabwe, 74% is men and 24% of ministers in the previous cabinet whose term ended were women. How does that look now? Is it any better?
Well, you'd also recall, Thabo, that this concern was raised even during the election nominations, that there were few women. So in as much as there may be need to create this equitable environment for equal gender participation, you'd notice that the pool that the president was drawing from was naturally limited. So because of that challenge, of course, you would have a demographic deficiency in terms of the representation of women. And it calls for political parties to actually orient more women to be actively participatory in election processes so that the president in the future can be able to make relevant appointments that, that reflect the demographic dividend of our women in the country.
So you're saying the reason why it looks like that is because the president had a limited pool to select from?
Yeah, and that was confirmed by even the participation of women across the political divide in the elections.
All right. And let's turn then to other posts that have people asking questions. For example, the Skills Audit and Development Ministry. Others saying this is the first country to have such a ministry, and they're looking at that as just the distribution of patronage. Is there a need for that ministry?
There is, and why? Because there is a complementary supporting ministry to that effect. You'd notice that our higher and tertiary education ministry effected what is called Education 5.0, which focuses on industrialization and all of that. So you need to audit the skills that you have, the skill set across all various disciplines of the economy in order to create opportunities for employment, and also to evaluate the skills that you have in government and see if those skills are reflective of the national vision that is supposed to deliver prosperity to our people. So you need to enhance that human capital development, because all aspects of statecraft development are predicated on the skill set that a country has. So I find it as a very important ministry that is going to help evaluate the skill set in government and the skill set outside government to see the possible allocation of tasks to our human capital, our growing human capital in Zimbabwe.
Before I let you go, let's touch on this other allegation that I see in one of the reports. They're saying that the president is trying to create another post, actually a space for another one of his sons, Emmerson Jr. They're saying he's already being roped in meetings with foreign investors. How true is that?
Well, I do not know about that. I've never seen him, I think, participating in issues that relate. I've never seen any, rather, of the president's sons participating in state business. And I'm saying this in my capacity as an occasional insider in high-level government platforms. So I think it is just one of those flimsy allegations from those that have lost elections. And as the common norm of our toxic political environment, there is this affinity to vulgarize, there's this affinity to delegitimize, because you've got a bitter political opposition that is given excessive media attention, and our media does not also pacify some of these issues that emanate from outright and flagrant bitterness of our opposition.
So you, of course, have said to us we must look at the competence of those who are in government. You've got something called a performance monitoring tool. There's a special name that you use in Zimbabwe, but we call it performance monitoring here in South Africa. One analyst saying that particular instrument has not been useful, because if it was, we wouldn't be seeing the recycling of same faces who have not necessarily done well in particular portfolios. For example, if we talk the economy of Zimbabwe.
So, in government, I think this started from 2019 there about the issue of performance contracts, and it was cascaded to directors in government and deputy directors. So when ministers are appointed into office, permanent secretaries, chief directors and directors, they are performance contracts that are actually presented to these office bearers to give policy indicators on what is expected of them. So I can simply say every minister that is back, it's not like other ministers were not dropped without perhaps mentioning names, but you have got those performance contracts. So the fact that you have got certain people that have been brought back, some who have been reassigned, it's quite clear that they've been reassigned because perhaps their innovative elasticity in their particular ministries yet reached its limit, so they're trying out other things. And so performance contracts are there, and there is actually a dedicated unit in the office of the president for performance evaluation for projects that are delivered by ministries. So the issue of saying old faces have been brought back and it's just an issue of nepotism, for me, I would describe that as suspected and unsubstantiated notions of nepotism and recycling of dysfunctional office bearers.
Yeah. Richard Mahomva, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on, Director of International Communications Services in the government of Zimbabwe. Right.